Welcome to the Awaken the Awesome podcast with your host, Olivier D. This is Awaken the Awesome, a podcast where we acknowledge that we are all in this together. Through enlightening conversations and personal insights, we like to engage with individuals just like you, who show us how they are bringing a little bit of awesomeness along their individual journeys. Our hope is to inspire you to always keep pushing and to stay awesome along the way. It was always my goal with this podcast to bring you people and stories, reminding you that you have more in common with those superstars that you admire than you care to give yourself credit for. In that regard, I found that the best way to do that is to introduce you to a couple of individuals off the beaten path, whose warm generosity and powerful insights can offer just the right amount of perspective and guidance to help you along the way. In conversation with my next guest, LaToi Storr, I couldn't help but feel a great sense of respect and appreciation. As a lifestyle blogger, speaker, self-care queen, anxiety crusher, and fellow podcaster, Toi's incredible skill with sharing her story with words of sheer vulnerability and raw truth can leave some uncomfortable, something she's well aware of. Whether we're talking about postpartum depression, where to find the time to be creative, the accountability required to own our responsibility in toxic situations, we all have something we can learn from one another, and I believe that these are the more human conversations that need to be had. See, with all the noise and comparison we often fall prey to, it's easy to believe that we are so messed up or damaged or unworthy that we are the only ones going through what we're going through. If you are one of those people convinced that there's nothing that special about you, your story, or your particular journey, then today's episode is for you. So let's get into this. Awaken the Awesome, episode 155 with LaToi Storr. Here we go. It's really not, basically just mincing words and telling you, I really applaud you for these wonderful, I've never heard of the word blogcast. I really enjoy it because that's basically what it is. It is you bringing forth the reality and truth of these issues, these themes that some might consider, a little bit,
taboo. You're not supposed to talk about it, right?
Yeah. But the way you bring it with such truth, such courage, such raw vulnerability, because you talk about a lot of things about your personal struggles. And it's something that I really, truly admire because it's something that most people fail to understand, that you can only tell your story.
Right.
And that's something that's truly genuine. And I really want to applaud you for that. And sorry for the long ass intro, but I just wanted to say a heartfelt welcome to the Awaken the Awesome podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here, to be honest with you.
Just leading up to this recording earlier today, I was listening to the latest episode, something that really touched me and something that I'm really sure you have a lot to talk about because the title itself says it all. What happens when they don't want the help? And for those of us listening who haven't heard Toi's episode yet, I really invite you to stop this recording, go on Apple Podcasts, Conversations with Toi. I'll link it up and find the episode. What if they don't want the help? Because Toi, it is so true, because it's something I truly have been struggling with over the past, I could say, a couple of months, because upon this journey of growth, you realize that personal growth is exactly that. Right. Personal.
It does not extend. We want it to extend to our loved ones, the people that we hold close. That could be our mates, children, whomever. And I think the rude awakening for me was realizing that my personal growth literally stopped at the tip of my nose. Like I could not control anyone else. There was no one else that I could just, I can influence. I could encourage, but it stops at me. I can't do anything to make anyone come on this journey with me. And it was kind of lonely. It gets a little lonely when you feel like you're growing, especially when you start to grow mentally and emotionally. You want other people to join in the joy that you have watching yourself, almost like a butterfly coming out of the cocoon stage. And you're like, wow, I'm really, I feel in myself. And it's not even just a feeling myself, like I'm really doing this, but it's, you see yourself from the other side. Cause you remember, at least I know for myself, I remember the times when I was negative every single moment of the day. I remember when somebody would give me a compliment and I would just have this, aggressive conversation. I remember when, I was in the house completely depressed and hoping that I was going to come out of that. But couldn't at the time. And so then when you notice, when you've gone through something and then you're like, you want to share it with everyone, and everyone does not share that same joy. They don't share it because they're not in the same timing. Their growth is not in the same timing.
And it's, I'm not sure if you agree, but for me, that's the only way I can use. Sometimes it really makes me, I don't know, angry or sad or both, because you see so many things, so many revelations are coming coming into the light. And you're like, guys, like, listen, you guys need to understand that there's so much more to this thing called life. You can do better. You can get better. You can overcome.
Right.
But do we need to understand, Toi, that it's also part of our own sense of acceptance that not everybody is at that stage, and you need to accept that.
And it's a hard sometimes. Again, it's a hard pill to accept. Hard. And especially the closer that the relationship is with you, the harder the lesson becomes. Because if I see a friend that's kind of removed, someone that I kind of know that they're an acquaintance, and you see them, like I have a friend that just will post everything so negatively on like social media. You can tell they're going through, you can tell they need assistance, you can tell they need the help, but they won't go get it. Am I more or less inclined to be like, just send some prayers, or, I'm just thinking of her and things like that. But when it's someone you truly love, someone that you want to walk hand in hand in life with and want to be on the same path, and then yet their growth is not at the same place, that's the hurt piece.
So true.
You can't carry them. You can't get them to see, even when they see the results in your life. I've had sometimes where I've had people admonish it, and they're just like, wow, I wish I could. And I'm trying to like, yes, you can. Look, I'm so excited. And you start telling your story, but it has no resonation with them, because again, we're all at our own little timing and place. And that's why, like, when we connected on Lunch Club, like people connect when they're at that same level of growth.
There you go. Energy is energy.
Yeah. And that energy, you know what? We waste so much time trying to pull these other people into our growth. But do you know what happens? At least for me, I'll speak for myself. Mm-hmm. I've had where I was trying to pull someone to my side of, or my level of growth, to the point where it made me so angry that, again, I started reverting back to those old ways. That depressive state comes on because you're like, why am I not doing enough? What am I not doing? And you take it on as your own struggle. Mm-hmm. And I found myself taking 15 steps. I won't even say 2 steps back. I would say 15 steps back, trying to get somebody to see that they needed to be on a different path.
There you go.
And it's not worth it.
We're on that emotional ladder. We're on that psychological ladder. We're on that performance ladder, right? Where we're like, okay, we're going one step after step after step. And then we look back down and say, hey, that's my friend. That's my loved one. Let me go back down. No, even
it costs you so much more.
And for those of us probably listening, thinking, oh, that's such a pompous perspective. No, it's not. It's really thinking listen, they need to catch up to you. Okay. And you'll be happy when they do, but you can't also like go back down to that state where you were, because it wasn't a fun place to begin with. That's where you got out of that state.
Right.
And it's really made me grin when I was listening to your podcast. And basically you talked about those of us, those people probably in your circle. And the second you get those 2 words, you've changed. You've changed.
Listen,
how do we deal with that, Toi?
For me, it just tells me, one, that I've obviously grown enough for other people to see that change. So in one aspect, it's like, okay, LaToi, you're doing this, right? And then the other aspect of it is frustrating, because it usually comes from the source of people who wanted you to change all along. Like, it's always someone who recognizes that you were in a bad place, wanted you to do differently. But then when you be differently, then it's like, you're leaving us along. You've gotten too big, especially because I blog and I do podcasts too. So then it's always like, okay, now you're doing this, you're monetizing your thing. So now you're too good for everyone. And I'm like, I'm just trying to live, but I'm trying to live well, because we only have but this one life. And I kind of chalk it up to, again, instead of looking at it, like you said, this pompous mentality, but it's not. I have to tell myself that this is part of the process. This is going to be a part of the process. There's going to be people who are temporary, and there's going to be people who are there for the long haul. And temporary could be 20 years. We think 20 years is a lot of years, and I'm not saying that it's not, but at some point of the journey, the road splits.
So even after 20 years, the roads can just diverge, and okay, you know what? Thank you for your presence in my life, and this is where we part ways.
And it's painful. Like, I don't want to make it seem like as if you're just like, okay, I've arrived and I'm good. And now we're at this road and I'm going to separate and you go your way. And if you come here, I'll see you. And if I don't, it's not really as cut and dry. It is, but it's not, because again, you're still human. You're still going to grieve this grieving process. It's almost like, even if it's like a friend, it's almost like having to divorce your friend after 20 years and having that same level of pain, that same level of hurt goes along with that.
Wow. You talk a lot about personal accountability and a lot of the recurring things that you talk about, and you're very open about it. And thank you so much for bringing that so vulnerably. The fact that, therapy plays a big part in your life, in your road to recovery, and also dealing with the negative space that you found yourself in. And whether in regards to your personal relationship, your couple, motherhood, dealing with postpartum, all of that, that's a lot to unload.
It is.
And for those of us, again, because 2020 is 2020, but mental health has been a very big issue over the past year. And a lot of people, even without dealing with the pandemic, you realize are dealing with a lot of baggage, a lot of layers that they still, because again, it takes a lot, as you say, to, take ownership of the fact that, you know what, it's not them, it's me.
Right.
And it's a very scary thought to look into the mirror. And what are the first steps, if you will? Because we're trying to, just leave with people with a few actionable steps, if you can. We're not therapists, we're not social workers, but in your own experience, in your own journey, what are the first things we can do to actually address, even taking that road? I'm not saying go directly to therapy, because probably it's not for you, but how do we address those layers, Toi?
Again, like you said, we're not therapists or anything like that. But for when you start to take accountability, again, you have to deal with yourself. It's that raw look in the mirror, or that raw look inwardly to see that the things. My mom always taught me that everybody ain't telling the same lie. So when you get confronted by multiple people that are bringing up things that you're not accepting, that first step is literally just saying yes. Yes to the things that are being brought to your attention, because we've said no 1,001 times. I remember so many times when, for instance, my husband would be like, you really are doing A, B, and C. I don't know if you're noticing. And I would be like, no, that's not me. That's not me. And so that acceptance also comes with a yes. Yes, this is who I am. And it's not an easy pill to swallow. I mean, nobody wants to be told that what they're doing, who they are, and what they're projecting is wrong. It's negative. It's bad. So the first step is literally saying, yes, this is who I am. Because if you can't, you won't be able to heal what you can't call it out. If you can't call it out, you're not going to heal it. There's no rhyme or reason for you to deal with it if you're not able to say, yes, this is who I am. That first step is just saying, literally, this is who I am. Bad or not, this is who I am.
Stand by your truth.
Yeah. And that's a raw truth. I mean, because it depends on how deep in depth that this is. It's whatever this trigger that you have in your life, because it's really a trigger. And you know what's amazing is that it took almost a pandemic for people to accept the same cries that a lot of people who were dealing with mental health issues were already saying. There are so many people that were saying that I'm upset. There's something going on. I can't process. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm feeling overwhelmed. And people who would just basically minimize that have now gone through this pandemic and have now gone and experienced some of the same feelings, some of the same triggers that people who have already acknowledged or were in the process of acknowledging what they were going through already. So
it's amazing. It's amazing. And you know what? I love the fact that, just picking back off it, I can only, just parallel that with myself, because, when you're always smiling and everything's fine, everything's fine. But, when you're not sleeping, when you're going off the rails just because, the kids didn't put their boots back in the same place, or this thing is out of place, or this thing is out of place. And the thing is, you bottle so much stuff in, because again, everybody has different coping mechanisms. For me, it wasn't really, substance abuse, but me, it was mostly workaholism. A lot. I poured myself a lot into job and a lot into work, and I was just so tired all the time.
Right.
You never wish to accept the things that you do, as you said, those triggers, the things we use to just divert or distract from what's really going on. you know?
Right.
And
But
go ahead.
the busyness of schedules can sometimes, like you said, it's such a camouflage, because even now, even though again I've had these awakening moments and I have help and I'm still continuously doing the work, there are days and moments where just the tightness of my schedule will make me feel like I'm all right when I'm, like you said, you're not. And for me, how I process, sometimes I can tell that something is wrong is if I start to become elevated, if I start to yell, get really, really irritated and irritable. I didn't realize until I went to therapy that high levels of irritability is a telltale sign sometimes that you actually are dealing with anxiety and other issues.
Wow.
I never knew that before. I came, unfortunately, from a house that my parents, they would escalate and they would yell. So I just assumed that was normal. And then once you took me, once I'm no longer in that type of environment, I have the power to choose the environment that I'm in. I found that one, it was comfortable for me to do, but then two, I didn't realize that was an expression of what I was going through on the inside. And I had never heard it before.
Wow. What does that say about our personal script, our family script, as I like to call it?
Right.
Because, I'm from the Caribbean, I'm from Haiti, and you know what? Corporal punishment, yelling, you don't question authority. That was basically part of our family makeup. My parents were amazing. Of course,
right.
When we were out of line, like any Black parent, we got put back. Like, listen, you you will not do that twice, which
Not
is totally
here.
fine. Okay, not
Right.
here, not here.
Not here.
But paralleling that to the fact that, again, I will not speak my parents' name in ill will or anything. I'm a parent myself, and I understand that, every child is different. And I'm not going to say I was an easy child either. But right now, we understand that this is a new reality, and we have the power to write a new script for our children. And that where trying to go with this, the power of choice. Mm-hmm. I don't care what your baggage was, but you have the power not to drop it onto your kids, and that's not always easy, is it?
Well, let me give you an example. This recently just happened, and I hope and anyone that's listening can truly hear me. So as a podcaster, one of our most beloved things is our equipment, whether that be our sound, whether that be our mics. So just, it is what it is.
Yes, ma'am.
Last Friday, I actually the latest episode I recorded earlier, and I was going back to add something in, and my daughter broke about 2 to 3 pieces of equipment.
Aye.
I mean, broke it. Like, there was no way to fix it. There was no glue, no Gorilla Glue. It was none of that. And I didn't discover it until about, I want to say 10:30 at night. And of course, now I'm trying to record holding these 2 pieces together because I needed it. And, at 10 o'clock at night, there's no, where to go get anything like that.
Nope.
And I remember as a kid, and I talked to my parent about this already. She already knows I'm going to mention this, but I was talking, I remember at 10 o'clock at night, me remembering how when I was a kid, parents back in the day would wake you up. Like if you did something and they just discovered it at 10, 11 o'clock at night, they didn't care. They would wake you up in the middle of the night.
What is this? Explain yourself.
And what is this? And whatever consequence came from that. And it took everything in me again to divert my mindset to doing just that. And I had to, and listen, it's an outer body experience, because I've talked about this on the podcast before, but for me to change the trajectory of my children's lives and again, making this choice, even though I was mad, like I could have cooked fish on my body. I was totally hot. Get you. But at the same time, I would have lost ground with my own children had I woken her up at 10:30 at night to discipline her in any form. And at the end of the day, that still wasn't going to fix the equipment.
Exactly.
And I'm trying to build a situation where my kids can come to me and know that it's a safe place. And you don't build safe places by using the same old tactics when you know better. And so I had to remain calm, do what I had to do. Now, mind you, on top of that, I ended up staying up till like 5 o'clock trying to fix a bunch of things, but because that's how serious I am about it. But at the same token, I was able to have a conversation with her to explain to her why the situation was as serious as it was, and I was able to calm down, because a lot of times when we do things, especially as a parent, sometimes it don't be about the child, it'd be about us. It'd be about our ego. And so I had to check myself and deliver a situation again, because I don't need my children healing from the things that I'm saying or doing to them. And so for a parent anybody who's listening and who is a parent who understands that old school way of dealing with your child, you always have to make that new decision to do something different, because I always ask myself, what would I want my children to talk to my grandchildren? What would be the tone in which I would want them to talk to to their future children? So it's a big responsibility.
Yes, it is. You're right. Yes, it is, because you are writing the story of your legacy. You are, because they are going to overstay. Basically, they're going to outlive you. And you have the power to write those pages of what they get to tell about you. It's not always easy from one parent to another, from a podcaster to another. I totally am high-fiving you through this one, because it's not always easy. Again, for people, anybody, because we're trying to, give people support. For me, when that happens, those situations where, right now I've learned to be vulnerable with my children. As a man, as a father, I'm tough. I do this, and, I'm all about that. And sometimes I am vulnerable. Sometimes I just need a hug. Sometimes I just Daddy just needs a hug. The day's been long. It's heavy. Can't sleep. I'm upset about a bunch of stuff because I've dealt through stuff. I can't start explaining depression to my kids, but sometimes I'll just tell them, I need a hug. Daddy just needs a hug. And we're just going to sit here and watch cartoons, and that's it. And sometimes, you know what? They will learn that, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to have an authority figure who maybe doesn't have all the answers. And you know what? This is how we teach them, because that my father couldn't teach me about mental health and vulnerability and connect with your feelings. No. Does that make him a bad father? No. No. But it's a different set of realities that you have to deal with. It's a different script that we have to write for them.
Right. But sometimes in the midst of writing that, for me, it's sometimes the hardest lessons, because for me, that's almost a trigger for me, of me watching myself do that to them, to give them that type of parenting is almost triggerish for me. And I'm dealing with that quite often. Sometimes I have to take a time out where I have to tell my husband's very understanding. I'm like, listen, I need to tap out, because, everybody considers the mom to be the main only source of love or attention or whatever emotional support. And there is many times when I've had to tag team my husband to say, we're on the same page, but I need you to step up a little higher, because I need to take this time out, because I don't want to have this moment be spoiled by whatever it is that I'm bringing into the situation. And that's hard, because, society will tell you that if you want to be a good mom, you have to be all the things all the time, 24/7. And I'm not trying to be my children's superhero. I want to be the mother that they can look up to. But in some regards, if I don't take care of myself, I won't be that person that they can look up to, because I'll bring in so much level of trauma that what good if I am to them if I don't take care of myself. And that's something that I wasn't easy to learn as well, because who says that? I talk about it, you talk about it, but who there's not that many people that are going to be real to the bone to say, as a mother, I need to say, I'm sorry, I have to back out. I cannot do this right now. Because it shows that there's a weakness there. There's something that I should naturally be able to do that I'm not doing, but it's something that I have to do.
Overblown, socially imposed expectations of parenting that a lot of people think that people need to break away from that dynamic, because it really drains you, I think, to believe that you have to be your children's everything all the time, everywhere, all the time and everything. Sometimes you need to understand that, whether in regards to your relationship, if you're in a couple, again, if you're in single parent, that's probably a different reality. But sometimes you need to understand that you can't give what you don't have. And just hearing you, and I am high-fiving you on this one, because it's so true. What good am I to you if I'm a source of toxicity, negativity, and anxiety? I can't be that for you right now. And it takes a very big person to admit the fact that, I am the wrong element of this equation. It takes a lot of you talk a lot about that, understanding where we are and being able to, call ourselves out on our own BS and understand that, we can't be that person. And you know what, come what may, but I need to do me first. If that sounds selfish, I'm sorry, but I need to do me. And that is the safest, bravest, and best thing we can do for those that we love. but it
Right.
takes that really huge step, doesn't it?
It does. And it's hard. And there are some times when I can talk about it, like not I can talk about it anytime, but there's times that, and even when talking about it, I'm just like, oh yes, like I'm sometimes high five myself just because, you know, there are times when the lesson or those moments get a little more intense than others. But I'm very dedicated to doing the best that I can for myself through them, but making sure that I'm okay. Because there was moments, and I talk about it when I was dealing with my postpartum, that I didn't even know what I was going through. Because again, especially in the Black community, we don't have this outlet of being okay to go and talk to someone. Everything is housed inside in our homes. We don't outsource that, and we're not taught that. We are taught to keep that very much contained. And so when I actually, it was fun, not funny, but it was interesting that when I went and started the process of trying to get therapy, because, you know, navigating the mental health system is kind of hard sometimes. A lot of people they don't think that. And if you're never gone through and had to get therapy, I will say this as an encouragement, because when you go and you make that initial call, you think that you're going to call, you're going to get an appointment. And you may find, like in my situation where I called, I'm telling them what's wrong, but the reception on the other end is just that. They're just there to intake. They're not there to like problem solve right off the bat. And so the frustration of waiting for someone to give you that phone call back, waiting for an appointment to open. And then that meantime, that space in between,
Wow.
waiting for that appointment to come to pass once you finally gotten one, and having yourself already in a turmoil. The best suggestion I could do is, for me, I just begin to keep a tight, very journal of writing down the very things that I was experiencing, the very things that I was feeling, the things that I was thinking, because then that became a great starting point for when I went to finally talk to a therapist. Because we think that once we make that appointment, we just walk right in and we get these appointments and then we're good. That doesn't always happen. So I know that there's that space in between the time your appointment is made into the actual appointment. And I have been encouraging people who have reached out to me is to get that journal, because some people say, like, I know I'm going through something, but once I get there, what do I talk about? Having that journal might be the best thing for you, because it gives you a starting point to open up the dialogue so that you can become comfortable enough to continue that journey.
It's true. It's true. Because sometimes, you know, you're going to be lost for words, or, you know, again, with social interaction, yes, you're sitting in front of a therapist or even over the phone, and we're like, okay, what's going on? And it's just like, you could express it like 2 seconds ago, but right now someone is asking you, okay, what's wrong? And then you have no idea.
You have no answer.
You have no answer.
You have no answer. So this would be a great place and a great way and a great tool to have to then open up that conversation. And I also want to be very clear that once you start the process of therapy, people have this movie-like theater persona of going to therapy back when life was open, laying on couches and talking to your therapist and then leaving and everything is fine. There are going to be moments when you leave therapy when you're very, very upset. You are almost angry about whatever may have come up. There are moments when you can just sit in the car and all you're going to do is cry. There are going to be moments when I have left therapy and had to come home and just like take a nap because I was so exhausted from just, it's almost like laying this big load and you drop it off at your therapist and they give you the tools to help you. And then you're feeling like completely depleted. And the reason why I mention that specifically is because that is a true story of what happens when you're in therapy. It's an up and down situation. It's not a happy-go-lucky situation every single time.
And as we said, it is a very scary thing to look within. And yes, you do have to own your truth, even when it's not pretty. And, you know, come what may, there are some, unfortunately, not pretty situations that come out from that. Different type of, like you said, it ebbs and flows, peaks and valleys of emotions. And sometimes, you know, when you unmask and you take out the layers, sometimes you might not like what you see. And I totally get you. And thank you for laying that out for us, because some people might be on the fence as to like, oh, maybe I might need to. If you're asking yourself the question, chances are you might have to consider that option. And it's very important that you understand what you're in for. And I wanted to also highlight, because you keep talking about it, and how your husband was a very big support in regards to your own journey when you were dealing with some issues, and when you had to admit that, okay, okay, he's present, he's patient. You said that he's been very patient. He's been very patient. You've been very patient. How important is it for us to acknowledge those who weather the storm? Let's call it like that. Who weather the storm with us, through thick and the thin, because some people are just basically not going to deal with our BS, but those
Right.
people who choose to stick around, whether loved ones, significant others, friends, relatives, even colleagues, how do we celebrate? How do we, again, cherish those who, despite our abrasiveness, despite our toxicity, despite the vitriol, stick around and still help us? You know what? They can't solve the problem, but at least they're there to keep us in check.
Yes. For me, I find myself complimenting my husband very openly to let him know that I appreciate his support. I'm always complimenting him. I think that's the best way to do so. I think sometimes you don't want to ever get into a position where you feel like you're taking that partner for granted, because honestly, with my husband, it wasn't always like that. And we weren't on the same page when it came to my mental health and the things that I was going through. It took a long time for us to get to this point where we're on the same. Once he understood what was actually happening, because again, I couldn't tell him and he didn't know. But once we got to that point and we had an understanding and I was getting the help that I needed, it became, I would say, a lot easier, not necessarily 100%, but it makes it easier for someone to see the change and they're able to then stick it out. And so I always want to compliment him. I compliment my friends who were there. For me, I try to send little personal notes to my friends. I know we're in a world of social media, and my friends are always on my social media. I'm on theirs, but it's something different about sending someone a handwritten note and just simply saying thank you for just being in my corner. And I don't think we should forget them, because they are a part of the story. They are part of our journey. And with those like little encouragements, even when you're having your roughest day, knowing that you have someone by your side is truly amazing. So always just make sure, like I said, a thank you, acknowledgement. For me, cards or letters, just say thank you. It doesn't have to be anything really, really big. It could be something as small as that. But again, you never know what you're doing for that other person too when you tell them that, because other people go through their own things in their own time.
Because it is foolish. As you like to say, we're all in this together. We are so connected, but it is also foolish as a society, as a people, as human beings with all these facets of emotions to think that we have to go through this alone. It's foolish to think that, isn't it?
Right. And I think too, that's what makes me want to make sure that I encourage those who feel like they don't have a partner. They don't have someone that, sometimes when you're in the midst of of a trigger, or if you're in the midst of a meltdown, you're in the midst of high levels of anxiety. Sometimes what we want is we want people to show us the support that we truly want or we need. But sometimes we don't actually verbalize that. Sometimes you can think that you are telling your partner what you need and you're actually not. And if you're the type of person that may not have someone, you may not feel like you have someone in your corner. Sometimes we just don't realize the blessings that we have around us. It could be as simple as a neighbor that checks in on you every now and again. That is still someone who is in your corner. We have to change the way that we look for support, because that was one of my biggest struggles. I wanted certain key people to play their role the way that I saw the role being played. And sometimes it's like we have these little incidents where there are people in our life that we don't even realize is there all along. Like I have a neighbor that literally treats me like another daughter, and she checks on me and makes sure that I'm good. And those are those types of small incidents that we need to hold on to when we feel like, again, sometimes it's based upon how we're feeling. And a lot of that can be tarnished by the triggers and the emotions that we're going through, to really recognize the people who truly are and do love you.
Wow. And you tell so many stories. And because I forgot to ask you that, because it's like basically a low hanging fruit question, because we're dropping so many gems right now. But is that the journal side of also recording your journey? Is that basically what birthed Conversation with Toi, or is there another story behind that?
Well, Conversations with Toi, again, I call it the blogcast, started from the blog. And literally what ended up happening was, in the midst of me going through therapy, when I was in my postpartum, my therapist was like, you just seem like there's something else that's inside of you that needs to come out. And she said, why don't you try something that's creative? And of course, at the time, when, at the beginning stages of my journey, I was just like, there's nothing for me. I'm a mom. I don't have this type of level of time, and I'm busy. I'm changing diapers, and I don't really have time to find any type of creative niche. And I was like, what am I supposed to do? So she's like, you don't like to write, maybe you want to make videos. And I was like, I don't know. So what actually happened was I started to write, and that's how the blog was birthed, from that raw dealing with postpartum. And then from there, then the podcast came along as another medium for me. And that's how it was birthed. It was birthed. It's funny how, again, we always talk about how we look at our past and we look at the things that we've gone through as this horrible place in our life. But if it wasn't for me going through that darkness, I would not be at this place that I'm at right now. First of all, I wouldn't be healthy and whole. I would not have the wherewithal to get my life together. And on top of that, neither the blog or the podcast would have been birthed whatsoever. But it was from this dark place. And it's funny how the things that we look down on in our lives is the very thing that is used, and it's used as a vessel. And for me, I look at it as, I hope that someone is listening, that they'll be encouraged. And so that's always been my goal, is to make sure that someone reading the blog or someone listening to the podcast is encouraged that, yes, in the midst of your mess, it can truly be turned around and used for the good. And that's how everything was birthed. It was from this raw place.
That's what I appreciate about it, because, like I told you, I've been listening to it, and it's just like, I really appreciate the fact that, there is no artifice. There's no sugarcoating it. It's like, okay, this is my reality. This is my truth. I'm not bringing other people's messes into this is my life. Right. Take it to come what may. It's salty, it's spicy, it's sugary, it's sweet sometimes, but no, this is what you're going to get. This is what we're going to talk about. And this is how I feel about it. And this is, the genuine aspect that I truly cherish about it, because it's a truly inspiring venture into both the creative space, but also approving ourselves through the story of one human being who, like you said, if I totally get when you say that, if only one person can take inspiration and empowerment and just a little bit more of hope, there's that word again, hope. Right. And try just to add a little bit more to their life, waking up tomorrow, that is a life well served.
But you know what's crazy is that when I first started writing, and when I started talking, people were like, you overshare. And I'm like, what? You can't overshare your story. Like, people, I guess in a way it was just like, and it's not even a guess. I was told, like, I would never share that. I could never tell that, even though I went through the same thing. I could never tell that. And I'm like, okay, well, this is what's birthed inside of me to tell. And the craziest thing is, every time I feel like maybe, you try to listen to those people that say these negative things, and I find it to be negative, is every time I've gotten close to be like, well, maybe they're right. Maybe I am sharing it. It's funny. I'll have someone reach out to me and say, can you share more of your story? And then I'll know. It's like a renewal every single time, because it's like, wait a minute, if I hadn't shared my story, there could be someone that's waiting to hear that. And I think about the times, again, when I was in my most darkest places, feeling alone, because I felt like I was literally the only one going through, whatever I was going through at the time, thinking I was like a unicorn somewhere. And I was like the only one walking this earth that was going through these tough times. And when you hear somebody else say, I've been there, I hear you, and they see you, whether they see you and just, it's another feeling. It lets you know that you have to share your story. You literally have to share your story, because for you to hold that in, you hold someone else's victory in your voice. You hold someone else's victory in the pen. So I don't allow anyone else to tell me that I shouldn't share as much, because I know that there's going to be someone that's literally going to wake up and say, like you said, that they can get that one last moment to say, you know what, I'm going to get up and I'm going to try. Even though I may fail 1,000 more times, I'm going to try that 1,001, because I was that person. I needed somebody to tell me that 1,001 time to get up and you can do it. So that's the only reason why I know that even in the most crazy situation, I'm going to continue to share my story.
So true. So true. Because the best thing we can do is, again, try to help the fellow human being. Because as you said, we were all in that place. At some point, The comparison I like to give is for the gym. You can go to the gym, you can't do one push-up, and then you look across the gym, there's somebody doing 100, but you can do two. You know what? Do your two, and at some point you'll be the person doing 100, and you'll teach the other person, hey, don't worry about it. You'll get there. And it's a cycle. It's a cycle, and we have to be there for the next person and the next person, because you know what? It's a revolving circle of love, and that's what's going to get us through it and over the hump.
You would think that's the way it's supposed to be, but we got to keep sharing.
We got to keep sharing. Toi, I want to be very respectful of the clock.
No problem.
It's something that really energizes me every time I have these conversations. It's something that I'm, again, very and extremely grateful for. Like I said it before we started recording, I'm very grateful for your time. It's something that I truly appreciate. For me, it's a genuine feeling of joy and, again, support, from Canada and wherever these words find you. I really want to wish you the best of success. I want to thank you for the platform, for the blog, for the podcast, and for telling your truth, because definitely a lot of people need to hear it. Guys, please go check out Toi's both blog and the podcast, Conversations with Toi. Go in on our Apple Podcast. Please subscribe, leave a wonderful rating. It is definitely worth your time. And again, I can't say anything more. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really do appreciate you for being here.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Just again, shameless plugging time, as we like to call it. Where can the listeners connect with you on the interwebs?
On the interwebs, you can find me at Toi Time Blog. That's TOITIME blog. I am on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And of course, the blog and the podcast. Nice.
I'll definitely do check out the blog post for the episode once it goes live. I'll definitely look up all the web presences and we'll make it happen. Always last parting words, running tradition. I like to leave the floor open to the guests. Just a quote, a sonnet, a song lyric, a book, just anything that anyone can pick, as I like to call it, the next step towards that next level. What can we leave the listeners with?
Ooh, I would say the next level for you or anyone that's listening is that you are not the worst part of you. You are not the worst part of you. So no matter what it is that you have going on, and no matter how low you feel like you have gotten, you are not that lowest moment. That is not the worst of you. And you have so much left for you to do. So don't sit there worrying about how, just get up and do.
Wow. LaToi Storr dropping gems all the way. Oh my God.
From Philadelphia.
I am so grinning everywhere because this is such great energy. This is one of those episodes that really going to go all the time. You learn no favorite episodes, but this is definitely one for the ages. Toi, I want to thank you again for your wonderful time. Guys, another episode of Awaken the Awesome in the can. As always, do check us out on all the available podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. You guys know where to find me at this point. Thank you so much for the wonderful journey. Thank you for supporting this mission. And as always, stay blessed. Have a great evening. And do stay awesome. This has been another episode of the Awaken the Awesome podcast. We always love to get your feedback, so please do drop us a line via Instagram, Facebook, or email. Our email address, awakentheawesome@gmail.com. Do visit our official website at awakentheawesome.ca, where you can find our entire back catalog of episodes and incredible guests. Also, if you haven't already, please hop on over to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, give us a rating, and leave us a review, as this helps us tremendously in growing this podcast and spreading the word to more awesome listeners like you. We always appreciate your support, and thank you for listening. Stay awesome.